Hello, 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 and welcome to another monthly wrap up. We have a lot to get through, so I'm just gonna jump right into it. And as I mentioned last time, we will be going over these in sections. So if you want to jump around, I will have a menu down below. We'll be starting with channel things and updates fairly quickly at the start. Then we will jump into our TBR game points, and then we'll get right into the meat and potatoes, the reading wrap up, which, whew, your girl read a lot. Okay, starting with channel updates and things. I do technically have a wrap-up sort of post that I do publicly over on Patreon, so if you would like to see a little bit more, you can go over there. Otherwise, we'll do a quick breakdown of some of this stuff. Big thing, I ended up posting 7 videos here on YouTube. I did decide that I am going to transition more into themed vlogs instead of weekly vlogs, and I'll probably be spreading them out just a little bit so that I can give myself time in between filming to actually edit and upload and all of that stuff. You may or may not have noticed that I did update the thumbnails for a lot of videos. I am really trying to push towards planning videos out more and making better thumbnails and titles. It's still gonna take some time. We'll see how that goes in the long run. I also announced the official Patreon tiers for my besties. So if you're interested in supporting me, these are the 2 tiers and this is what you can expect over on Patreon, which I'm pretty excited about. I do hope to have a 3rd tier sometime in the future, and whenever that happens, things may shift slightly, but for the most part, this is what you can expect. And that probably won't happen for several months. This month, we had 2 exclusive Patreon videos, another vlog newsletter, along with the revival of my Besties TBR Recommends video, which next month is going to have exclusive non-spoiler reading vlog to go with it, along with the spoiler reading vlog for our March book club pick. And then this is the Mark Public POC book club, which we will have a live show here on the channel sometime in April. And as I keep mentioning, I also will be doing Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers as one of the guest hosts for the Literally Dead book club put on by Kayla over on Books and Lala. So really excited about doing all of that in March. I did also post an audio newsletter for the patrons. I posted some work in progress sketches for some merchandise that I'm hoping to work on in March. And I did post some stuff over on Instagram, but not nearly as much as I was hoping. I am just really struggling with social media outside of YouTube and Patreon. So I guess we'll see how things go in March. Fingers crossed. It is time for me to figure out how many book tokens I'm going to get in March to buy books, but we obviously have to figure out how many points I got from the TBR game first. So, starting with the points that I have left over from last month's 88 points, which is 3 points at the top. I did get 2 board points while I was playing the February game, so we do have that on the board as well. Now it's time for us to figure out what my prop points are going to be, which I will be doing something different this month and using my mini books to showcase what I read and what goes with what. Starting off with 4 points. All TBR jar picks are at least 2 points, so this is an additional 2 points. 2 points for this book. This is an old book that I actually chose prompts for multiple times, so we get 2 points for finally completing this one. This is a Besties TBR pick. 1 point for this book, 1 point for this one, 1 point for this one, 3 points for this book, 3 points for this book, 3 points for this book, 1 point for this book, 1 point for this book, 1 point for this book. Every book that I read this month would work for this prompt, but I'm choosing this book, so we get 1 point for this one, 1 point for this book, and 1 point for this one. We ended up with 28 prompt points. I am currently at 64 books total this year, which I know is insane. It's not normal, and I don't imagine I'll be able to keep this up all year, but it's been working out really nice, and I've been having a really good time reading a lot of books that I've been super excited about. I do get 5 points for surpassing the 50 book milestone. And that does mean that it is time for us to figure out our motivation points. Reminder that these are things that I don't currently do a lot, but would like to do more of. Motivation. Let's see how I did. 3 books in poetry, 4 books in classics, 3 nonfictions, 1 reread, 1 continuation of a series, 1 new release, and no arcs. Here are the books that I annotated in February. The points are going to vary drastically based off of the actual time, effort, and how much I ended up doing for each. 1 point for this one, 1 point for this one, even though it kind of feels like a cheat. 1 point for this one, since I didn't do a lot. 2 points for this one. I did not finish this one, so 0 points. And I plan on doing more annotations for both of these very soon, so 0 points for now. The only thing I didn't do this month was read arcs. Otherwise, I did pretty well, and I ended up with 18 points from that. For the number of books read, I did complete 30 books in February. 9 of those books, I already got my points from the TBR Jar Picks My Next Reads video. So I will remove 9 points from that, and I'll only get 21 points for books read. And for pages read, I did read 9,534 pages. There was a rollover of 220 pages from previous months, which means that I have 9,754 pages, which will give me 9 points. I'll also get some additional rollover points from the January motivation categories that I wasn't counting originally. So let's see what that ends up being. In January, I read 7 continuations of a series. Here are the books that I annotated in January. I started this one but didn't finish, so 0 points. This is another one that I started but didn't finish. I'm kind of thinking of DNFing it though, so I might just give myself the 1 point. And if I continue and finish it, I'll give myself either 1 more point then or no points, depending on how much actual annotation I do at that time. And then lastly, this would be another 2 points since I did a lot of annotating. All right, so we get an additional 10 rollover points, bringing us to 13 points there. And if we add everything together, we get a whopping 96 points. Wow, okay. For every 5 points that I get 1 book token, which means we will be getting 19 additional book tokens. These are my leftovers from last month. Stars are 1 token and moons are 5. So I'll be getting 5, 10, and 15. So 3 moon tokens, and then 16, 17, 18, and 19 4-star tokens for our 19 book tokens. So most of these will be used for the subscription book boxes that I'm currently subscribed to. So we might be doing another TBR Jar Picks My Reads this month so I can get some more points. Now that we got all of that out of the way, let's get into my reviews for the month. Every single book this month did end up in a video. So I will show you which books are in the video and then go through them pretty quickly. So if you would like a deeper dive, you can check the video out for more details. But for the first video, I have these 3 books. I ended up reading this one. It is a YA romance, and I do really like the characters and the whole kind of situation that we have going on, because even though one of the characters was in some sort of reformatory type program after getting in juvie, after doing some stuff, he was such a sweetheart and just very thoughtful in general, and it obviously played into his past. And then we have the other character. She's struggling with the expectations that her family has on her, and basically everything she's doing is for them and not for herself. So they build a friendship that becomes a little bit more as they become more towards each other. I can see what this was doing and I really liked it, and I would recommend it towards young audiences. But for me, I wasn't like swooning, but I did really like what it was doing and the conversations and all of the characters. So yeah, I would recommend. Then we have Frizzy, a graphic novel about having naturally curly frizzy hair and how that plays. This is technically a middle grade. I'm not a big fan of YA or middle grade, but yeah, I've had some luck, and this is definitely one that I would recommend. I got all kind of emotional and into it. It is very simplistic. There's nothing like amazing about it, but it is very relatable, and I really like the messaging and would highly recommend this for kids with curly hair. Okay, and then the last book that I ended up reading in this vlog was Color Struck by Zora Neale Hurston, and this is a play. So it's like 40 pages, it's super short, and the first part of it was actually talking about the history of the Harlem Renaissance, which I really ended up enjoying. And then the play itself, which is focused on colorism in like the 1900s, I think it was pretty good, but I kind of wished the commentary was focused on kind of the opposite problem that happens within colorism, and or had multiple perspectives on the topic, because I don't know, I wanted more from it. Then in the next vlog, I ended up reading 3 books. I started with The Sweetest Remedy, which is more of a family drama sort of situation than a romance, which is what I was expecting it to be, because we have our main character who is a biracial woman and has grown up living with her white mom, and then she finds out that her Nigerian father, who has not been in her life, has passed away. And she's trying to struggle with how she feels about that when she finds out that he requested that she go all the way to Nigeria for the burial so that she can meet his main family. And obviously there's a lot of drama with that, and I loved every bit of it. Not because it's like super drama filled, but because I feel like the conversations and the situation was handled just so well. As for the romance, I was pretty on board at the beginning, but I feel like this does one of those things where it's telling you more than it's showing you, so I just didn't care. Like, it wasn't that it was bad. I liked the characters together and the general idea, but this did not feel like a romance at all, even though I think that's how it was pitched, but I could be wrong. For what it was, absolutely chef's kiss. Murder in Westminster is a historical type of murder mystery with our main character who comes home and finds a dead body basically between her and her neighbor's house, and she realizes that because she was at a secret pro-abolitionist meeting, she can't really talk about her alibi, and she knows she's probably going to look suspicious because her and them didn't get along. And so she decides she's going to try and figure out what is happening before something gets pinned on her instead. Overall, I enjoyed this as a great way to pass the time, but I was disappointed because I have read other historical romances featuring Black characters from this author before and absolutely adored them. So I was kind of just expecting having a stronger connection to the character in here, where I felt more mid than anything else. Even though I am interested in continuing this series, I wouldn't say it's as gripping or exciting as some people may be looking forward to, but it was still nice. Like, I still liked it. And then lastly for that video, I ended up reading When the Vibe is Right. This is another YA romance, and I loved it. Like, I ended up really liking this one. And again, I listened to the audiobook for this one, and it does focus on Trinidad, and so there was a nice Caribbean accent from the narrator, which I just ate up. And then also, I really liked the overall story. We have a main character who wants to be a seamstress. She's working for her uncle who has a company that does fashion, and specifically there's an event for Carnival, I believe, that is coming up, and there's all of these things that they're trying to do to keep the business afloat as it is struggling since it's not here with the times. And then there is a little bit of a romance going on here with her and a rival who is really good with marketing, and she's all like, maybe you can help the situations and stuff, and things happen. I was a little bit annoyed with the characters at times, but regardless, I friggin' loved it and almost didn't care. I don't know why, because it did some YA things that I hate, but I was just like eating it up. Like, I was here for it regardless. I was all like, hey baby, like, I'm ready for the next chapter. I don't know. I was just invested. I was invested to see where things went, and I liked it. I really ended up enjoying it. All right, so the next, whoops. That wasn't supposed supposed to happen. Hopefully these are still in the right order, but the next two videos have a lot of books because they were pretty intensive videos. This is for my TBR jar picks, my reads for a week, that reading vlog, which I was using to try and get more book tokens so that I can buy more books because I had overbought stuff. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. If you've seen the video, you know what I'm talking about. It was a ton of fun. I highly suggest checking it out. A lot of people ended up liking it and I'm super proud of it. The first book I ended up reading was Savvy Sheldon Feels Good as Hell. This is a story where the main lady, her ex-boyfriend dumps her because he thinks that she's too fat for him. And she's like, I'm gonna get a hot revenge body and show him up. And in the process, she ends up doing some work on her kitchen and end up kind of falling for the guy who's doing the work for her. I didn't really care so much about the relationship aspect. The friendships was a little bit fun. There was some like toxic weight loss things going on, which I wasn't a huge fan, but it wasn't too severe. I feel like there was some conversations of trying to do things for the right reasons and love yourself and finding somebody who loved yourself. But overall, I kind of just felt mid about this. It was meh, which is unfortunate, but it was still a good time. Like I wasn't upset with it at all. So that's not a bad thing. Next up, I ended up reading Hard Dough Homicide by Olivia Matthews. And this is the second book in the Spice Isle Bakery Cozy Mysteries series. The first book being Against the Current. And this one is very similar. It's another murder around this family-run bakery and, you know, amateur sleuthing. Predictable, fun, cute, enjoyable, great way to spend some time when you just want to be cozy and comfy and have nothing too crazy. I will say that the murder in this one was very similar structure-wise to the previous one, although I did really appreciate some of the consequences that came up because of all of this stuff happening and that being part of the conversation. But I am interested in seeing where the next book in the series goes because I'm kind of worried that if it follows the same thing every time, it'll get boring pretty quick. That being said, there was some setup tension and things going on, which I didn't love, but I think can lead to things that I really enjoy in future editions. So I am feeling pretty hopeful for the future of this. Then I ended up reading Dead Dead Girls, which is another murder mystery sort of story. This one a little less cozy and a little bit more raw and real, but still with a amateur sleuth. This one focusing on a young woman in the 1920s where, you know, you've got all of these speakeasies and then there is a murderer rampant and our main character gets pulled into the investigation. I did end up guessing some things, although there were some other things which I wasn't expecting at all. So overall, I did really enjoy it and I'm really excited to see where the book goes from here because I have no clue. And that's pretty exciting. And we have Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. And this is a nonfiction about feminism that focuses on the disparity between the popularized feminism that focuses on upper class white women, which doesn't really account for minorities or the lower class women and the issues that need to be overcome to put us all on a equal footing so that we can all actually benefit from feminism. And it talks about how these different things are interrelated and connected. I ended up reading this pretty quickly, so this is definitely a book that I have on my to read again because I would like to take out my annotating tools and mark this book up because there were a lot of really good quotes and points that I really appreciated, along with just the general inclusion that this book did. I think overall, it was really good and I would highly recommend. I did find myself a little bored at some times since I was more interested in reading fiction at the time, but it very quickly would ramp me back in with these just wonderful points and connections that I think were put out so well by the author. Then I ended up reading The Fastest Way to Fall by Denise Williams, and this is a romance that focuses on a young woman who is trying to get up in the world as she's working at a journalism company, but she doesn't really have an official place doing articles. And so she ends up pitching something, and her rival ends up working on this with her. So it turns out to be kind of a like work together but see who wins scenario, where they are testing out these rival workout apps, one focusing on healthy workouts and body positivity, and while the other one taking on more toxic approaches and focusing on toxic body ideals. And so, okay, editing me here to clarify. So she gets paired with the owner of the Good exercising app, which neither of them realize, and they have a discourse back and forth, which see that they start really enjoying talking to each other and build a friendship, which eventually turns into something a little bit more. I loved this. I loved the conversation. I appreciated the content warnings in the beginning. I really liked the back and forth conversations that the characters had and the chemistry between them. And overall, I think this book did a really good job with all of the topics that it covered. Then I ended up reading Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. And this is a story about race that focuses on a young Black woman who ends up babysitting a white child and takes her to a local rich grocery store where a white woman calls security on her, claiming that she stole the baby. And a nearby person ends up filming this horribly racist, awkward encounter that she has. And then the book branches off from there, where we start seeing the perspective of the white people in her life who are doing racist things, thinking that they are helping her, while in reality, they're just being kind of out of pocket and ridiculous. And that was not what I was expecting. Overall, it's not as heavy as I thought it was going to be, and its focus is a lot different than I thought it was going to be. But I really appreciate what it was trying to do, even though I don't necessarily think that I love how this actually ended up in the end. My biggest fear about this book is that some people who would benefit the most from the message of this book will probably not get it. And I know there's a ton of you who have already read this and do realize, you know, that the actions of these white characters in her life are pretty friggin' racist and out of pocket. But because some of it is pretty subtle, I do feel a lot of it will go over people's heads. Next up, okay, 2 Parts Sugar, 1 Part Murder by Valerie Burns. This is probably one of my favorite cozy mysteries that I've read, and I will say I haven't read a lot, so that might not be saying much, but I loved this, which is funny because I started off not liking the main character. She's gotten everything that she's ever kind of wanted. She's kind of vapid. And I listened to the audiobook. I really liked the way the narrator ended up doing her because I feel like it was very fitting, and overall it was so much fun. There were so many elements to this that made me really invested and really care about everybody involved, to the point where I cannot wait to get my hands on the next book in the series and continue it, because yeah, this was so much fun. I loved the vet, I loved the dog, I loved the mystery, I loved just everything going on. I love the circumstances. She inherits this house and this bakery, but she doesn't know how to do anything with that, and she's stuck with it for a year before she can sell it, because originally she was like, yeah, I'll just sell it so I can buy some more Jimmy Choos, you know, like life will be easy. I'll just come into all of this money and I won't have to worry about doing anything. And then of course it's not that easy, right? There's more that she has to do. She gets wrapped up into everything and she starts caring about stuff, and it's so wholesome. It's predictable, sweet, wholesome, and I loved it. Okay, this book I was not expecting. I've had this book for a while and I was gonna throw it away. Drive Damage, I just wasn't excited about it. So I'm so glad that I got this, because this book is amazing. Everybody should read this. How Dare the Sun Rise by Sandra Uwiringiyimana. And this is a memoir of her life as a refugee and a survivor of a horrible massacre. And it is very heartwarming. It is told in a way that isn't as heavy as you would think under the circumstances. It is heartbreaking, and it was fascinating to hear her experience and her perspective after going through the things that she went through. And it was just so beautifully done, super amazing. This is one of those books that I feel like everyone should read. The stars and the blackness between them. Okay, so this is a YA coming of age sort of story that has a little bit of a sapphic element, as we have two characters, one who was originally in Trinidad, but after her mother found her with another girl, gets sent to the States with her father, where she meets our other character who's dealing with her sexuality and her health. And the story focuses around their friendship and how they kind of get closer to each other as time goes on. I like the idea of this, but if I'm being honest with you, I didn't love it. And it's sad because it did a lot of really cool things. I like the messaging, I liked parts of it, but I just wasn't invested, even though I do feel like there are some people who would absolutely adore this. I just wasn't one of them. Okay, and then our last group and largest grouping of books is for my TBR Marathon. First book, The Poet X. This is another book told in verse, written by Elizabeth Acevedo, who wrote one of my favorite books, Clap When You Land. But this one is actually about poetry, as our main character is trying to come to terms with herself. It's another YA. She's growing up. She's dealing with the struggles of growing up, having a religious mother and feeling like she's not allowed to speak, and having a desire to be a poet. And it's the struggles that she goes through and the things that she deals with and the bonds that she creates. And it was emotional. It was beautiful. I cried. And I would just highly recommend. I get the hype. Elizabeth Acevedo is definitely one of my favorite authors, hands down, and I'm so excited to read more from her in the future because just amazing work. Next up, I ended up reading The Love Con, a fun, sweet romance about a main character who is trying to achieve her dreams by participating in a competition TV show for cosplay. And for the final challenge, the contestants are supposed to do a couples cosplay. And because she's a plus size woman, one of the judges doubted that she would be in a relationship. So when they ask her who she's going to couple up with, she decides to pick her best friend and tell national television that they are romantically involved. So it is a fake dating friends to lovers trope, and I ended up loving it. I loved it so much. I felt the chemistry. I personally love fake dating just in general. I liked the nerdiness. Just overall, it was a fun friggin' time. Would recommend. And I ended up reading this thriller mystery story, Like a Sister, which is about a young woman who finds out that her famous sister died of an overdose. And when she hears about the circumstances, she realizes that there's something fishy about what's going down, because her sister would never do what they're saying she would do. And so she decides to start investigating what is actually happening, and in the process ends up learning more and more about her sister that she didn't know. This was interesting. I was definitely invested the whole time in the mystery and finding out what was going on, and I feel like it did a really good job keeping me engaged and trying to find out. The Romantic Agenda, another romance scenario. And this one, we have an asexual main character who realizes that she is in love with her best friend. And she, knowing that he is the type to do big displays of affections, believes that it is finally time that he is going to admit his feelings for her as well. But instead, he announces a special vacation that he is throwing on for somebody else. And she only gets invited to entertain that somebody else's friend. And so she, very confused about everything that's going on, because she didn't even know he was in a relationship beforehand, decides that this is going to be her last opportunity to tell him how she feels. And while she's there, the friend that she is supposed to be entertaining so that he can, get closer with the person that he's interested in, they decide that they are going to fake date to show that she is desirable and to make her best friend jealous. But obviously they start catching feels for each other. It ended up being really adorable. I really liked it. I loved the conversations. I was super nervous. I'm not a fan of like somebody trying to break up another relationship, but because of how it was set up, it didn't really feel that way, even though there was like kind of those vibes. Like he wasn't really in that relationship yet, so it seemed a little bit more fair game. And then also just like the different conversations that were being had, the representation that was in it, and you know, the communication and the friendships and all of the things happening. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Then All Her Little Secrets. This is another one. I admittedly was a little bit nervous about reading this one because we have just secrets, lies, drama, all the such, all the things. Our main character ends up coming into work one day and finds her boss dead. And turns out she was sleeping with him on the DL. And so she's all like, ooh, not only does that not look good, but also I have some secrets that I don't want people looking at me for. So she decides that she's gonna pretend that nothing happened. Like, I didn't see nothing. I didn't find him. Hopefully they will leave me out of this. She finds herself in some weird positions and she ends up forced into trying to figure out what actually is going on. It is told in multiple perspectives as we are getting this current day scenario and we are learning and uncovering her past and the secrets and the lies that are happening behind that and why that's happening. I will say I was invested the whole time, but I did feel like a lot of the reasoning was stupid. I feel like it was well done for the most part, but it wasn't completely my cup of tea because I don't like that, but I did like it enough. Bronze, a book of verse. This is a poetry book by Georgia Douglas Johnson, and I discovered this poet in the Minor Notes Volume 1 Penguin Classics, which is a bind up of a bunch of poetry by different Black authors from, you know, history basically. And I really enjoyed her poem, and so I was really excited to read this, but admittedly when I first started, the first couple of poems were like huge flops for me. I was all like, ooh, like, is the only poem that I like of her the one? I believe it's called Black Woman. I loved that. After the first couple of poems, it got back into other ones that I really enjoyed, so I ended up marking a ton of these for me to go back and read multiple times so that I can analyze. Poetry is definitely the type of thing that I really want to read over and over and over so that I can get a deeper understanding. And this read, I highlighted all of my favorite poems so that I could spend more time on them in the future. Then I ended up reading Neighbors and Other Stories by Diane Oliver, and this is another kind of classic sort of collection of short stories by an author who died in 1966. So obviously the stories are classics and focuses on the earlier Black experiences. In general, I feel like these were pretty well done and I really liked some of them. There's definitely snapshots into the time, but then there's also some experimental short stories in here. I guess I was expecting everything to be pretty vanilla, and then we had just like a couple that I just wasn't expecting. They weren't crazy, they weren't different or surreal or, you know, the kind of stuff that you would see now, but they were just different enough that I was like, oh, okay, I see you. This ended up being pretty enjoyable for the most part. Probably say it was more of a 3. Fairly mid overall with a couple of gems within it. Better Than Fiction. This is one I technically read in this video, but I'm doing a deeper vlog for the patron besties. So actually I may not have talked about this much in this video. Whatever. I read it around the same time. This is a romance. We have our main character. She ends up with a bookshop. She's not much of a book lover. She actually prefers the movie, but she inherited it, so she feels like she's obligated to try and make things work. She ends up befriending a author who's brought in for an event, and things go from there. It was cute, it was simple, it was fun, I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it as much as I was hoping. The Neighbor Favor, another romance that I had really high hopes for. I am struggling to describe what this book is about. There's like this back and forth between our main character and an author, and then there's this whole thing between her and her neighbor. I liked it. I didn't love it. I do think some of the reasonings was pretty stupid, so it made it harder for me to get on board with some of the like lack of communication that was going on, even though I think for the most part it was a fun time. Okay, Vagabonds. I'm gonna say right now, I really struggle with books that are told in these bite-sized moments that are not obviously connected to something or don't have an obvious plot line, because I really like character building, and I feel like that storytelling makes it really hard to get connected to the characters. And that is something that this story did. This is about outcasts, basically. Vagabonds are a variety of different types of outcasts that have been classed into this, titled group or category to kind of other them. And the whole book is kind of telling you the stories of these different vagabonds, giving you these glimpses into what that looks like, and then building commentary on top of it. I was very confused for a decent part of this. I was all like, what's going on? There's some surrealist stuff happening. There's questions around death and life and demons and all of these things, but everything also seems pretty mundane and normal and contemporary. And so there's this like magical realism sort of element that I have going on. I'm not entirely sure what's real, what's not, what is the point of all of these conversations. Later on, we get a through line that I kind of wish was presented earlier on, but it connected things a little bit more, even though I feel like it's kind of obvious when I talk about, the fact that we're getting these bits and pieces of all of these vagabonds and why, they matter, basically. Once I realized that, I started to enjoy the bits more, and I appreciated the book a decent amount in the end, but I did suffer through a good chunk of it trying to figure out what the point was before it came. And so I wouldn't necessarily say this is my jam, but I see what it was trying to do. And I feel like this is the type of book that I might enjoy more on a second read, since I know what the point is now. And that means I could appreciate everything that happened more so than on the first read for me. So I have mixed feelings about this, basically. Then I ended up reading Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby, and this is a 5-star read that I ended up reading back when it came out in like 2021. And I loved it then, and then I reread it again for a book club where I actually did intense deep dive annotating and analyzing the story, seeing whether or not I still appreciated what it did, and I totally friggin' do. I love the storytelling, I love the conversations, I love the representation. It is very frustrating that this is a story about two horrible homophobic fathers who are trying to avenge their gay sons after they were murdered. And so it's mostly talking about them coming to terms with how much they screwed up by not being better fathers to their sons. And now that it's too late, they're trying to do something about it. I think it was beautifully done. It's a cautionary tale. It has so many golden nugget conversations about race, class, homophobia, acceptance, family, expectations, society, all kinds of stuff. And I loved it. Still 5 stars, absolutely adore it, and I want to read more stuff from S.A. Cosby. Highly recommend this book. Then I finished Modern Sudanese Poetry, and this was translated. So the beginning part tells you about the process of translating it and some backstory on things, and there is also a section in the backs that gives you context for some of the culturally specific things within the poems. But in general, the poems were very accessible, and although some of them really weren't my jam, some of them really were. So I have several things in here that I have highlighted to once again spend more time analyzing, rereading, and really engaging with more in the future. I did even mark some passages from poems that I didn't love the entire meaning or messaging behind it, because there is some level of misogyny in some of the poems since it is an anthology. A lot of these didn't have that issue. I wasn't necessarily like offended by anything, I just didn't care for some of them. So I don't know. I don't know 100% how I feel about that. Like, I wish it was a full compilation of things that didn't have that issue. So I guess beware if you do pick this up. But some of these poems in here are just very beautiful to me personally. So then I ended up reading Lone Woman by Victor LaValle. When I first started it, I was like, oh, I wonder what's going on. Midway through, I'm like, ooh, I might not actually be enjoying this. And then a little bit further into it, I was like, actually, well, this is going off into a direction that I wasn't expecting. And then in the end, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm totally on board. I really enjoy this. So yes, that is what this is about. I'm not going to go further into it. It's Western. There's a trunk. There's secrets. There's expectations and stuff. I went in knowing as little as possible. I feel like you should too. If you're interested in it, it does things. It's like the most useless review ever. Okay, then I have How Beautiful We Were by Mbolu Mbu. And this is a story about a fictional African village that is dealing with the harsh effects of an American oil company trying to drill their land for oil or whatever, and how the toxic byproducts of that is negatively affecting its people and killing and harming and hurting their people and their village and all of that, and what they do to try and overcome this. Now, this has a pretty obvious through line in that this village is trying to survive under these circumstances, and it's the different things that different people within this village do to try and overcome it. But it is also told in a kind of small story vignette-y sort of way, so I never really felt fully connected to any of the characters, even though there was, you know, returning of the characters and there was that through line plot story. I liked what it did in general. I feel like the conversation was interesting, but overall it felt too long and I didn't enjoy the way that it was told because of that. Like, I want to have a character that I could really care about. I think it does some stuff really well and the conversations in it are nice, and I know some people end up liking this, but I guess I just didn't really care regardless, which was frustrating. This isn't a favorite. And then the last book that we ended up reading for this video and for the month was James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. This is another nonfiction, specifically 2 essays that focuses very much on racism and the Black experience during the time. I really, really enjoyed the first essay through and through. The second one, I really, really was into it in the beginning, and then I kind of got a little bit bored, if I'm being honest with you. I spent so much time highlighting and engaging for like the first half of the book, and then I kind of just blew through the rest of it because I was ready to move on to the next thing. That being said, I will probably reread this in the future again because I do really like his writing, and I feel like there were a lot of really good quotes within this that I would love to engage with again, read again, and collect in the second half, which I wasn't doing that as much with. Overall, I do recommend this, and I'm interested in reading more stuff from him. Thank you so much for hanging out. Consider becoming a bestie over on Patreon, and I will catch you in the next video. Until then, bye!